fit, you're carrying any kind of little knock or injury, or you're recovering from injuries, as we know Mark is. This is going to be a brutal weekend.
Yeah, fortunately for Mark, there are more left-handers than right-handers in this weekend. 11 to the left, 9 to the right. We know that the racetracks generally go predominantly left. Marc Marquez is the clear gold standard in MotoGP, but as you mentioned, it's been quite a while since he's actually won here around the circuit that we called him the king of. If we go all the way back to 2018 or 2021, should I say, Marc Marquez's last victory, which followed the first of 3 crashes from the lead of a MotoGP race around here. Of course, last year was largely down to, I guess, a drop in concentration, a mistake when he put the curb, which was slightly wet. Marc Marquez, who almost got off the bike and pushed it home for victory here last year without crashing. There is his unrivaled record on screen around the circuit of the Americas. But is that record good enough to deny Aprilia, which is clearly the bike to be on right now?
Yeah, we used to set off on the plane to make your long trip over to Texas, and the guessing game was, well, who's going to finish second behind Marc Marquez? Just felt there's that little bit of extra motivation, that little bit of extra fire in the belly this weekend. He was livid with himself when he made that mistake, crashing out of the lead in that first sector last year. Very much winning on US soil. It's not just here in Austin. A MotoGP winner in Laguna Seca as well, also over at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And of course, his winning journey in MotoGP did start right here. The youngest ever Premier Class winner. Seems like a long, long time ago now, doesn't it? Blimey, 13 years ago. Time really does fly when you're having fun. 2013 when Marc Marquez took the accolade of being MotoGP's youngest ever winner away from Frederick Spencer. 2 Spaniards had the top outings over in Brazil. Saw them drop down the rankings. Pedro Acosta, of course, was our first KTM rider ever to lead the MotoGP World Championship. But 9th in the sprint, 7th in the Grand Prix season, slipped down to 3rd place, just 14 points behind Marco Bezzecchi. Martin Hernandez, who really did shut the circuit Grand Prix #1. He was a front row on 2 podiums there, wasn't it, Fernandez in Thailand? He was 3rd in the championship going into round 2 in Brazil. And with no points in the sprint and a rather lowly 10th in the Grand Prix, saw Fernandez surrender 4 places in the World Championship. Fair play to Lewis. We saw 3 other Aprilis ahead of him in the top 5. He said, "It'll take on the chin, no excuses." I just was not at the races at all.
No, it really showed up. Of course, Pedro Acosta, not the first rider this morning to overshoot turn 12. We saw Quartararo making mistakes there. Look at all the riders going wide as you slow down from the thick end of 350 kilometers an hour. You're carrying over 210 miles an hour when you start scrubbing up the speed for turn 12, getting yourself down the thick end of 300 k's down to 65 kilometers an hour, 40 miles an hour for the first gear at turn 12. So easy to overshoot that corner. But yeah, Raul Fernandez for the second Grand Prix weekend out of 2 in 2026. Found himself in qualifying 1, but wasn't able to escape that session. He was in third and he goes onto the it's certainly the case in MotoGP. If you qualify down on the 6th row of the grid in 16th place, no matter how much pace you've got, your weekend is pretty much trashed. He hasn't turned that right and he's given the speed or the confidence to get himself any higher field than in 10th place.
Yeah, it was his worst finish in 11 since Mazzano last year, so it shows that he has found some top form of late. He'll be hoping in, of course, a big race for track out of Aprilia. The home Grand Prix here in the United States. Brazil was just a blip. As we look at top Razgatlioglu, the 29-year-old Turk. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've got Prima Pramac Yamaha still yet to trouble the point scoring places in both the sprint or the Grand Prix. Both Razgatlioglu and Jack Miller without a point so far this season. Certainly a new experience coming to commentate on the GP bike for the but he has ridden here previously before. A few years ago now, back in the Red Bull MotoGP Rookies Cup. Seems at the moment, Lewis, he's not really laying the blame at the sort of slow learning process or the struggle in the Republic MotoGP career on Yamaha. He says that the real issues that we've got right now is still making tough adjustment over to Michelin tyres, and every time you listen to Top Black speaking to media, he's just like, no rear grip, no drive grip. When I open the throttle, I'm just spinning up and going sideways.
And you do fear for him and for the Yamahas in that respect if they're lacking rear grip around Austin, Texas. It's what you need coming out of 11 to get any kind of run onto that 1.2 kilometer back straight. The long straights here in Austin are all out of quite slow corners. The final corner, turn 20, onto the main straight is first gear, around 75 kilometers an hour. And as mentioned, the turn 11 hairpin onto the back straight, you also carry around about 60 k's from first gear, so Yamaha might find themselves in a little bit of a deep hole this weekend. And as good as Top Rank was on Friday in Goiânia to get himself into Q2, as soon as the weekend settled down to a clear, dry weekend, the Yamaha's regressed towards the back of the field.
The mind just goes back to this very Grand Prix in 2023 when Paul Fabio Quartararo was fighting for the podium and in a real good battle with Luca Marini, who was then of course on the VR46 Ducati, and as they powered down long back straight. It's embarrassing, wasn't it, to be frank, the gulf in top speed and top end performance between the Ducati and the Yamaha, a gulf which sadly for Yamaha really still does exist, as Marc Marquez there, he is going to be so desperate to take Politan on this Austin circuit, taking hard now through the left-hander, one of the beloved left-handers, second gear through here, about 130 kilometers an hour, he's turned 19. That's where he made that brilliant move on the inside of Alex and Taco Bagnaia at the start of that sprint last year. The first 2 laps of last year's sprint, Lewis, were edge of the seat stuff, weren't they? I mean, it was really heart in your mouth action from the top 3.
It was, I guess, a sprint that we're all desperate for at that stage of 2025, having seen Marc Marquez so comfortably take 4 victories, 2 sprint, 2 Grand Prix from the first 2 rounds of last season. Taco Bagnaia really did set the scene for that, as Alex Rins just ahead of us, putting his left foot out to indicate to Marc Marquez, but I'm getting over your way, come on through, but Bagnaia from 6th on the grid, of course, coming through to lead at the start of the sprint here last year, and really did stick one on the nose of Marc Marquez, which a few riders have done already so far this season. Acosta did it back in with Buriram, and of course Gian Antonio wasn't afraid to get stuck into the world champion last time out in Goiânia, so it's another reason why Marc Marquez will be quite keen to strike back here this weekend. He's been spending the first 2 Grand Prix being overtaken by people.
Yeah, you get the impression that Marc, while he's still recovering from that serious left shoulder injury he suffered over in Manrico, he still clearly hasn't found the sweet spot at the moment on the factory Ducati GP26. You do feel, I think the general consensus is that Marc has been in damage limitation mode in the first 2 Grand Prix this year. He's been on the defensive more than the offensive. I think we're expecting Marc to go much more on the attack, go much more on the front foot here this weekend. As Fabio Gian Antonio, we know he's a big fan of Coach, he's been on the podium here in Moto3, Moto2 and in MotoGP. He's on the right in third, trying a couple of times, he's not for long over a country of the conqueror. We have to say this, I didn't mention this to Marc in the press conference yesterday, because by his high standard, it has been a pretty average start of the season, but he should have won the sprint entirely, and he was very unlucky. So much misfortune when he was probably doing another podium in the main Grand Prix in Brazil. He did win the sprint last weekend in Brazil, and he was only just a whisker off the podium, so despite the fact all things considered he clearly has been struggling both physically and technically, Marc has been right there in the thicket. If he does hit the sweet spot, you better watch out.
Yeah, he's, I guess, looking back at the season and thinking, if I maximise this, that would be potentially second in the world championship. Right? So, I don't think anyone in it's such a long season, and Ducati points like a Barbie means they're just not necessarily found the sweet spot for it. So the conditions were to the bottom down the front end for Acosta as he ran in turn 11, very nearly the front away on the KTM. Both Buriram and Goiânia, not only the circuit layouts but also the conditions, certainly play much more to the strengths of the Aprilis and the tyre specifications when we have there to play much more into the strengths of the Aprilia than it has been Ducati so far. Of course, that will change with going through various venues on the calendar. But I guess, to look at it the other way, World Championship are not won on could-haves and should-haves, they're won on points picked up. Someone's gone down, and the yellow flags can't result in the second sector. Marc Marquez is in that second sector, and it is he who has gone down.
Well, we were just talking about how this already feels like a big weekend for the reigning world champion.
Quick too.
Turn 10 is huge. Turn 10.
This is quick.
Turn 10 is 4th gear. Over the hill, blind entry. You're motoring at over 250 kilometers an hour. You can see, this red flag. I think Marc's going all the way to the air fence. Now, there is a lot of concern, understandably so here, for the reigning world champion, because this is about as fast as a get-off as you can have in Austin. He's on his feet, albeit very gingerly. This one is really shaking up. At the 7 times MotoGP World Champion, he shakes out the left hand, just walking away with a little bit of assistance there from the trackside medics 255 kilometers an hour. You're charging through turn 4. It's downhill. Let's just have a look at this one then from our outside camera. Mark comes into view. Just out of view is going to be the observation tower here. Now he banks it left, loses the rear, and then that's it. He's just a passenger. He is along for the ride here. This is a scary one. This is a scary old get-off this for Marc Marquez. His last visit to Austin on race day a year ago saw him crash out of the lead, and the start of 2026 has been a painful experience. This as well. A bit of gravel rush on that neck, not sure.
Trying to protect his arms there, wasn't he?
Some of this just lost it on entry. And then with the lean angle he was already carrying, there was nothing that Marc could do. Not even Marc Marquez was going to save that one. Thankfully, he was able to get away from the scene under his own steam, but
we know he made it all the way into the padded fencing on the outside there, because when we cut to Marc Marquez, he was very much in the fence where his bike had ended up. So let's hope Marc Marquez hasn't been banged around too much. As soon as he was on his front there, heading towards the gravel trap backwards, he was already waiting for that moment and trying to protect his hands and his fingers.
He lost it at 190 k's, 90 kilometers an hour, and Marc Marquez lost the contact with the rubber underneath him. Red flags. Tough one to watch this. Of course, he has had all of those injury problems. It was another long, painstaking winter rehab for Marc after suffering that serious ligament and muscle damage and tendon damage in the left shoulder over in Mandalika. He's going to arrive back and start an immediate debrief here with the rider coach Manuel Poggiali. Let's just hope for Marc's sake in particular, and for the sake of MotoGP and all the fans gathered here in America, we want to see a fully fit field, the best in the right. Best riders in the world going toe-to-toe here in Austin. But that's rattled his cage without any pressure. He's wincing there in pain, isn't he? Behind Manuel Poggiali. He's taken the left glove off. You can still see there he's got the right glove on him. Maybe it's just look, he's shaking out the left hand there, didn't it, as well as he went charging through the gravel trap. I mean, we were just talking about the fact that Marc at the moment has not found that sweet spot on that MotoGP 26. That bike underneath him just does not feel like it is. Lacking confidence, lacking comfort to really push. We know Marc's swashbuckling best, and well, that is going to be a huge dent in the confidence.
Marc Marquez is such a confident MotoGP rider, and of course he's been through his knocks, he's been through the school of hard knocks over the last years, of course, and Marc Marquez has said many times he listens to his body nowadays. He doesn't push himself physically further than he is prepared to go. We've already seen that in the first 2 Grand Prix of this season. He wasn't prepared to take the big risks in Buriram through the right-handers, given his recently recovered shoulder. Let's certainly hope as well that there hasn't been any blows to the right shoulder. Fortunately, it was a left-handed corner that Marc Marquez went down on, so it wouldn't appear as if any damage to the shoulder has been done. It's clearly his hand, his left hand in particular, they can see nearest the camera with the glove off. His right glove, I think, is still on for Marc Marquez, but it'll be interesting to see whether he goes straight to the Ducati box or whether he takes a little quick trip from a precautionary point of view to the medical centre.
Well, code for 2025 ended in nightmare fashion for the 93. Code for 2026 has started with another tip-off for the 33-year-old Spaniard. That was a real tough get-off, wasn't it, for Marc? Pit lane, as you can see, will be reopening in 30 seconds time. So we'll be back underway for the remaining 34 minutes and 33 seconds of this session. When that red flag came out, despite a scare himself going down into turn 11, Pedro Acosta, our former World Championship leader, found himself at the top of the timesheets as we get another look at this scary get-off for Marc. You could just see it was just a rear that briefly stepped out and then just chucked a bit of weight, didn't it, over the front tyres. It came back in line, and that was it. Marc was just along for the ride. Yeah, he gets picked up there, doesn't he, into the gravel trap as he goes in backwards, unfortunately. I mean, this is where Marc's going to be completely disorientated. He's lost his bearings there, and he's just going to be thinking, well, how close is that wall going to be coming? 93 fans expressing some concern. Let's have another list of this one. 192 kilometres was it on the graphic there when he parted company with that GP26. Marc was down in 13th when he had that spill. He's done a 203.668. Of course, crashing where he did. This is a huge motorsport complex. It's a 1,500-acre complex here in Austin. I mean, isn't it really turn 11? The next corner where you can be 8 metres further away from the pit lane. This is why it's a long journey back to the paddock for Marc Marquez. Concerns with crew chief there, Marco Rigamonti.
He was still checking out that left hand, wasn't he, as we cut to him on the scooter there. He's still trying to make his way back to the box. So clearly there is an element of concern for Marc Marquez in what he's done to his left hand, and really an element of pain too, given the replays we've just seen. It certainly didn't look as if Marc ultimately collided with any sort of barriers. We certainly saw the bike as it made it go into the air vents, because there isn't an awful lot of room. Just a left-hand side of the picture we're looking as we now approach turn 11 with Agura. So yeah, we hope that Marc Marquez doesn't do too much damage. I believe this is him now just coming into shot. This is now making his way. I think he's around the outside of the final corner there is Marc Marquez. So he's getting closer now to the box, but don't expect him back on track for at least a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously all neutrals, everybody in MotoGP is going to be hoping that there's nothing that's going to impact on Marc's participation in this circuit in America's Grand Prix. It's so popular wherever we go in the world, but you've only got to walk through the paddock here today. Outside of the factory Ducati garage, you can barely make your way through because there are so many fans, red flag fans, who are desperate to get a selfie, get an autograph from Marc. Just hope that we'll be able to get himself back out on circuit for the remainder of the session.
About to say before Marc Marquez cracked, we were talking about the point he's potentially left on the table so far this weekend. Whether Marc Marquez could and would have scored more points is almost a moot point. The fact is, if he's not scoring the points he could have been, it's up to Aprilia to jump all over it and to pile the pressure on Marc Marquez. And that's what Marco Wetteki's doing at the moment with those two Grand Prix victories. Of course, it would have been even greater evidently for Marc Marquez had Bez won the sprint, which he was leading early on in Boyaram when he crashed out of a winning position. So it's up to Aprilia now. Whilst Marc Marquez is on his back foot, Aprilia at this stage of the Cota weekend, he's both lacking a little bit of confidence and in a little bit of pain. Aprilia have got to continue to pile the pressure on Marc Marquez and try and put him on his back foot again.
Yeah, when you're looking, when you're searching for a bit of confidence on a bike that just doesn't quite feel like yours at the moment, the last thing you want to do on planet Earth is have a 190 km/h get up. You can see that in the white shirt, Dr. Angel Chakra, MotoGP medic here, on the scenes just to check on the 33-year-old. He's now got that second hour. It's work here. FP1 session. It's not going to be a too severely disruptive weekend now as far as the reigning world champion is concerned. We've seen this first sector now through turns 2, 3, 4, 5. So physical, particularly on your upper body here, as you're just trying to wrestle the motorcycle through the constant, seemingly endless left, right, flip-flop.
Back out of the box, I think, just disappearing up into the background. As Davide Tardozzi makes his way back in and immediately debriefs with Gigi Dall'Igna to tell him clearly what Marc has just told him. So Marc, perhaps for a change of leathers, change of gloves at the very least, before we see him back in the Ducati box.
Fingers crossed then for Marc as we look at the Martinator. We drop down the hill through this turn 2. The right-hander through there 175 kilometres an hour. Now this is where Jorge Martin expects to suffer throughout the weekend. He did say yesterday, immediately after the Brazilian Grand Prix, where he had that double podium, that he was feeling some pain in that recovering left wrist. Of course, he did undergo more surgery on some lingering injuries from last year in the early part of 2026. He said even when he was out on his push bike around the third and in Austin, pre-Grand Prix weekend, he was suffering a bit of discomfort. He was a big head shake on the factory Aprilia going down the hill through that tricky turn 10. So yeah, upper body and certainly upper limbs. We've got a real workout through that first sector, where we're going to find out just exactly where Martin is at fitness-wise this weekend.
Yeah, of course, the good news for Jorge Martin, a 3 weekends break after this weekend, so perhaps he can just dig deep into his physical reserves this weekend. And he did say, hey, don't worry, if I've got an opportunity to fight for the victory, I will fight for it. But this is just underlining just how easy it is as you go over that crest, and it's bumpy too, as you plunge back downhill through turn 10. So easy to make the mistake Marc Marquez has just made.
This was Marc Marquez. Unfortunately, he did not get himself through that turn 10, which we just saw there, the big stake for Martin. This is what's going to be concerning Marc Marquez fans, and certainly factory Ducati squad right now. Just saw there, didn't you, as the left wrist, the left arm and the left hand was sort of getting a bit of a repeated bashing as he went through the gravel trap. Mark then making it to the barrier on the outside, the air fence on the outside, as we pick up Ayagura. Well, I think it's fair to say Lewis has been quietly going about his business behind, well, he felt like in Thailand, he was certainly having to play second fiddle a little bit to Bezzecchi and Ralph Fernandez. A little bit, just not much, just behind the pace of Bez and Martin last time out in Brazil. The pace is clearly there. Maybe with a slightly better qualifying, maybe a little bit more speed on a soft tyre on Saturday mornings. Ayagura could be a contender for the podium because just has not quite been there, has he? He's been close, but just not quite there.
No, fourth, fifth are Ayagura's results so far, and they've all been from qualifying positions lower than his finishing position, so he does generally move forwards, but I guess you can look at that two ways. He's making up ground on a Sunday, but making up ground and he's really having to make up how he qualifying somewhere near the speed of his bike, and of course he is on the same factory Aprilia as Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin right now, so there's plenty to be optimistic and positive about for Ayagura, including a bold last lap pass on Alex Marquez in Goiânia 5 days ago, which didn't particularly please Alex Marquez. Ayagura was very quick to apologise to Alex for that, but he said in the final lap of the race, I had to go for it.
Your optimism is not really matched by the same down at Tech 3 KTM with some rather concerning noises coming, particularly from the Maverick Vinales side of that garage. Of course, we know that Maverick missed 8 Grand Prix and suffered a serious left shoulder injury himself. That wet crash in Sachsenring in Germany at Q2, which really did set Maverick back big time. Surgery was required. He said yesterday, Lewis, I mean, we've seen him tougher, haven't we? Big time so far this season. Maverick, pointless so far this year. Concerns particularly after our Sunday Grand Prix over in Goiânia. He was 36 seconds by Marco Bezzecchi with the checkered flag. And it seems, what, 9 months now out of the Grand Prix when he first had that shoulder injury. And Maverick still reporting some major concern. He said he's going to go and see specialists in Italy immediately after this Austin Grand Prix. But there were no guarantees from Top Gun. He was actually going to see out this weekend. This is a track where he dominated on the 22 years ago.
Yeah, he's currently in 11th place in this second in Maverick, so I guess there are some trucks of comfort to be found for Top Gun so far, but it's been a bruising start to the season for him. And it's interesting because speaking to both Maverick and through the team in pre-season testing, we were told that the shoulder is 100% and that it's a non-issue now for Maverick Vinales. Clearly, as we've gone 2 Grand Prix into the season, that is no longer the case, so potentially some further work to be done for Maverick to get himself back to 100% over a sustained period of time. The more he's riding the bike, the more he's needing to suffer with that shoulder. And it would also appear that the romance with Jorge Lorenzo, the new rider coach for Maverick Vinales, is also going to Jack Capstone how strong that relationship is. Maverick was trying to calm that talk down yesterday, saying that we were always going to be working much closer in pre-season, and once the season actually gets up and underway and we start the racing action, then it's going to be much more a case of me working with my team, as in Tech 3, rather than coach Jorge Lorenzo. But Jorge Lorenzo was not in Goiânia, he's not here this weekend in Austin.
He's close to 2024 with one of the best in that win from pole position here 2 years ago. Rated history, it was the first to win for 3 different manufacturers in the MotoGP era. What a job Fabio Sterlicchini has done at the head of the Royal Factory Group. He has turned that RSGP. He was already a very good motorcycle when he first arrived there a couple of years ago, but what a job Sterlicchini has done to just take Aprilia to that next level. I've got the moment. Agura San is the top Aprilia this morning. Third fastest, 8 pounds per second, nothing between him and Marco Bezzecchi. Yeah, just to sort of give you an indication of just how much Vinales is suffering at the moment. 5 Grand Prix in a row. The 31 year Spaniard has not scored a single point. That's his worst run of his entire Grand Prix career. 13th place in the Catalan Grand Prix last September was the last time Maverick troubled the point scoring places. I feel that we might be imminently having to step away from the fold incident pretty soon to try and find out what's going on with that left shoulder. Well, Spargo keeping a close eye on his mobile phone at the moment.
Yeah, he, like Jorge Martin, who I reckon still on the road, would be grateful for the month break we have after Sunday's Grand Prix in the United States before we go racing for the first time in Europe this season. in Jerez on the final weekend of April to give Maverick the best possible opportunity to recover, recuperate, and get any kind of work done on his shoulder that needs to be done. Last year's winner moves up into 6th place. The KTMs were also plagued last weekend by real problems when they stuck a soft rear tyre in, really overloading the front end. Of course, it was Saturday morning in Goiânia. Take Pedro Acosta out of the equation, and the KTMs were the bottom 3 on the grid. Ranking 20th, 21st and 22nd they were, Binder, Vinales and Bastianini. So already looking a little better for KTM than it did as a whole in Brazil.
Yeah, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on just how Aprilia shape up here this weekend. This is the first Grand Prix of the season where Michelin don't have in their allocation what they refer to as one of their hardest carcass rear tyre, the rear tyre, which we have seen Marco Bezzecchi use to quite a brilliant effect over in Buram and in Brazil. So it's a more standard rear tyre allocation this weekend. Not saying that, of course, is the sole reason why Aprilia and Marco Bezzecchi have been dominating so far this season. It certainly does seem to be an advantage that they have been able to put to good use, as Gran Mir is the latest one to join the shake, rattle and roll club going down the hill through turn 11. So unlike Marc Marquez, he's able to navigate that tricky blind entry downhill turn 10. It's a spectacular corner. I mean, you really must get the adrenaline flowing when you get it right, but in the case of Marc Marquez, when he goes horribly wrong like he did, one to real confidence that one.
It's so important to get the best possible drop through because you've got that little mini straight down to turn 11-2, which in racing action is a big overtaking opportunity around this Kota circuit. Turn 11, where Marc Marquez crashed out the lead of this Grand Prix a couple of years ago. Let's get down to pit lane for the very latest on Ducati.
Yeah, I'm stood outside the Ducati box and have been for a good 10 minutes, hoping to try and get a word as soon as possible for you guys from Davide Tardozzi. He's currently in the back office with Mark, along with Marco Rigamonti, but crew chief to Mark has just come out and informed the team to prepare the second bike, told them to fuel it up, to stick the tyres in. Preparing the second bike is the best indication we've got as to hopefully things aren't as bad as first feared. Mark's still in the back office with Dr. Untitled Chapter, the chief medical officer, along with the lead doctor of the MotoGP medical centre as well. But the fact that Rigamonti has come out and told the mechanics to prep this second motorcycle is an indication that, fingers crossed, as we say, things aren't as bad as first feared for Marc Marquez. I'll remain out here and hopefully get a word from the team as soon as possible.
Brilliant stuff as always, Jack. Yeah, let's hope that Marc Marquez is able to return to this Kota circuit very, very quickly. Lap 11 of the session has just been completed by our series leader Marco Bezzecchi as Alpine Stars carry away what are some very second-hand 93 leathers at the moment. Bez, we just saw him on screens there. That's firing a 202.681. Tight at the top once again. Pedro Acosta, Fabio Di Gianantonio and Marco Bezzecchi were top 3, covered by just under 900th of a second. Pretty good responses so far by Acosta. The highs of Buram, he was flashing back down to earth last weekend over in Brazil, where he really threatened to get anywhere near the podium fight. People already this weekend. I can't believe this is making 100 Grand Prix starts weekend of Acosta. I mean,
crammed a lot into a century of races, hasn't he?
Has he got there so quickly? I mean, 21-year-old already making his 100th Grand Prix start. He does have very happy memories of Austin. Qualified second year in 2024, second in the Grand Prix, to become the youngest rider in Premier Class history back then to claim back-to-back podiums. First time he led a Grand Prix, of course, in MotoGP, wasn't he, here in Austin as well. And a Moto2 win here back in 2023.
Exhilarating race that was back in 2024 with Acosta, Martin, Marquez, Paco Bagnaia, Maverick Vinales was in the centre of the action as well as he was coming back from a poor start to ultimately win that race. He was 11th on the first lap. He does produce some spectacular racing here. Does the circuit of the Americas. Of course, one thing that Pedro Acosta has not done so far in what is now coming up to a century of Grand Prix starts is win a MotoGP Sunday Grand Prix as a rather second-hand 93 Ducati now makes its way to the box. We won't be seeing that bike running for quite some time. Mark's going to have one more bike, but he does return to the box to complete this FP1 session.
Broken motorcycles, Ducati have been hoping they don't need to patch up a broken rider once again, as Marc Marquez I'm not quite sure just when Mark will maybe try and head out onto the circuit once again in this FP1 session, if indeed he does try to get back out on circuit. Here's Fabio Quartararo. He was going through this part of the circuit last year. He crouched on the side snap and was quickly down the Lucas, wasn't it? Made the restart and was still able to find himself inside the top 10. He's just drawn to Pecco Bagnaia. Now time is going to be in the comment box because he's got a very strong third sector. That 2025 Copa winner. Off the hot dog in Tartome last year, didn't he? After he won the Grand Prix on a hot lap at the moment. That is Pecco. Let's go down then for immediate Marc Marquez update from Jack with Davide Tardozzi.
Yeah, thanks to Davide for joining us. How's Mark?
Yeah, Mark is fine, but a huge push, I guess, on the right arm and on the left hand. But Dr. Chart visiting said nothing important. I mean, it's painful, but he's not considering the bones. So that means that if he wants, he can ride again, but for sure it's painful.
And I imagine, as we just allow the bikes to go past, the plan is for him to have some further checks over the lunchtime break. No X-ray needed, though.
No X-ray is just a problem of skin.
Okay, great news. Thank you, Davide.
That is the best possible news. There's going to be bumps, there's going to be bruises, there's going to be a few scrapes. But Marc Marquez looks like he's escaped any kind of serious injury. Thanks ever so much for getting that into with Davide Tardozzi. And as you said, very good of Davide to come and talk to us. Well, there is some more positive news as far as the factory Ducati team are concerned, because Pecco Bagnaia, well, just mentioned the fact that he ate a hot dog to celebrate his victory here last year, and that was indeed a hot lap. A 2:02.546 has pushed Pecco into P1. So a blow to Mark's right arm, a blow to his left hand, which you could clearly see he was concerned about when he was coming back on the scooter with Ducati rider coach Manuel Poggiali. A blow to both upper limbs ahead of what's going to be a long week. 30 racing laps for this MotoGP around this circuit of the Americas here in Austin already. Mark with a couple of blows to his arms and his hands and on the back foot, to say the least.
Yeah, because this turn 10 corner, which we're seeing Marc Marquez crash at, is the first time in the whole lap where you're taking the same corner in the same direction as the one before it. You're going left, right, all the way until you take the second left-hander in a row. Turn 10, when Marc Marquez went down, what a good 20 minutes or so ago now. So he is going to be feeling that through the rest of the weekend, in particular once we get to the 20-lap Grand Prix of Sunday. So Marc Marquez, not only is he going to have to beat a fast and rampaging Marco Bezzecchi in Aprilia right now, he's also going to have to go through some physical barriers.
Yeah, with Mark's absence, I mean, that was on Mark's 5th lap of the session this morning here in Austin. He has now dropped down to 20th place, no surprise there. Only Diogo Moreira, the home crowd here, what a welcome. Hero worship came the way of Moreira last weekend in Bagnaia. Alex Rins are slower. Alex Rins, of course, a two-time Kota MotoGP winner for both Suzuki and for Honda. So having a look further down the order, we've got Bagnaia, Costa, Digiugi top three. World champion with that second, fourth. Magura and Marquez inside the top 6. Again, we've got three of followers right in the thick of it inside the top 6. Brad Binder at 7th place. He was on the floor 5 days ago in Brazil, and we pick up the South African now. A sharp climb up into this tricky braking zone for the first corner. 5 first gear corners this one on this 5.5 kilometre Austin circuit. Ralph Fernandez has made it all 4 Aprilias inside the top 8. Ramiro and Nea Bastianini are inside the top 10. Alex Marquez 12. This is great news, isn't it? This is what we wanted to see. A fresh set of leathers. He's going to be, without any question, walking wounded, a little bit beaten up there. A bit of strapping already on the left hand and the left wrist, as you can see. As for Marc Marquez, so some fairly rapid and running repairs for the reigning world champion. But as always, Lewis, he's full commitment and fully ready to try and get back out on circuit and find a time.
He's been through so much, hasn't he, in his career? He's been through bigger knocks than this. That's confirmation on the screens of the words of Davide Tardozzi speaking to Jack a few moments ago. Nothing broken, which is the key part of information there on your screens, which will allow Marc Marquez to continue in this Grand Prix of the United States. And I guess we'll now wait and see just how much pain is in his eyes when he does put that left glove back on again. The knee sliders now being made sure they're fastened in place. Helmet will soon go on. He's not showing any visible signs of pain there, is he, Marc Marquez? Yes, trying to now focus on the job at hand once again and trying to get his US Grand Prix weekend back up and running.
Yeah, this has not been the way that Mark would have ideally envisaged the start of the back to the World Championship shaping up after the real cruel misfortune of the tunnel failure and the ring damage when he was closing on Ralph Fernandez for a podium over in Thailand. But Mark could go through turn 4 in Buriram another million times with Matt coming his way. And then, of course, he was just off the podium last time out in the Brazilian Grand Prix. Against an early setback, make no mistake, that was a big early setback in terms of his hopes of winning once again here in Austin. At the moment, let's just check on the progress of Tech 3 as Brad Binder has such an easy mistake to make, just missing the braking marker there as the front forks get compressed right down to the bottom on the bottom of braking zone for turn 1. And there, Bastianini is 10th. And Maverick Vinales, his teammate, in 14th place. Of course, all the talk about Maverick's ongoing struggles with his left shoulder injury. Let's get some up-to-date thoughts from the box.
Yeah, and so far I imagine it's fairly positive news, Nico. Maverick telling us yesterday that shoulder injury he suffered in July of last year still causing some problems. We know how many changes of direction there are, in particular the first sector here, and he was concerned whether the shoulder will be able to withstand that, but he's out on track. He's put a good number of laps together, so is it positive news?
Yeah, no, obviously we don't really expect the shoulder to be a big issue this weekend. Obviously, this is the left-hand side circuit, but we've checked together with Maverick yesterday, and because there's no high-speed change of direction, this is the key, and this is where he struggled a lot in Brazil in this corner. So here, probably sector 1, there's one fast direction, change of direction, but the rest is not too bad. Plus the fact that he likes the circuit. All in one, it should be okay. But it's true that it's true that not a benefit.
Clearly, 9 months on, still causing him front concern. Heard some talk that maybe after this weekend he'll go for some further checks in Italy. There's a possibility that he has to go under the knife for yet another operation. And after this weekend, I should have put 100%.
It's going to Italy to have a check, and if he needed just a quick surgery to the issue, we don't really know more. It's very small. We have to take the opportunity of not having that up. It's 3 weeks without having to do something to be clear for the rest.
Perfect. Thanks for the update. Have a good one.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks as always to Tech 3 KTM boss Nico Goyon. Yeah, let's hope that Maverick Vinales does go back to Italy for those quarterly checks. He's going to be fighting fit when we head to Europe in Jerez. This is a great sight, isn't it? Marc Marquez back on his spare factory Ducati. He is going to be involved then in the final 10 minutes of this session. Ralph Fernandez, well, what did he say at the start of the session? Was Brazil a blip? Well, I think we've had our answer already. A 2:02.409. That's been Fernandez become the fastest rider around Copa this morning. Good luck that actually. He's got almost a 10.5 clear of Pecco Bagnaia in second place.
And that was his first time lap out of the pit, so we'll have to see shortly whether Ralph Fernandez put some fresh rubber in for that lap to lift himself up to the top. But however he's done it, he is now quickest. So we've got a Aprilia's first, 5th, 6th and 7th. Ducati's 2nd and 4th, and a KTM between them all in 3rd. None of those include this man, Marc Marquez, who's now to the left-hander of 7. He'll now go right through 8 and the left of 9 before he returns to the turn 10, which brought an early end to his session around about 25 minutes ago.
That was the plan a few months ago, wasn't it, for Marc Marquez this time around? Probably less rate than not. He was able to get himself through turn 10. It's not just where his body's at, where is his head after felt that we were going to, for the first time this season, Lewis, probably really see Mark cut loose and really see Mark back to his brilliant best, but would have rung his bell, to say the least, that clash at turn 10.
Of course, the circuit of the Americas, but I guess he might not feel as if this circuit loves him back right now, given the crashes from Leeds that we discussed earlier on, including his last 2 visits to Austin.
Yeah, and for just the second time in his short Ducati career, Marc has been off the podium in 3 successive Grand Prix. No problems for one Ducati GP26. A great weekend in Goiânia last time out, pole position, sprint and Grand Prix podiums. And as mentioned, he really does have a liking for this Copa circuit. Fabio Di Giannantonio was the first rider to find a 2:01 lap this morning, a 2:01.909 from Digit. He must be on pressure because he's jumped 3 tenths clear of Fernandez in second place.
Yeah, Ralph Fernandez is on pressure of a 2. Brand new medium front, brand new medium rear tyres. Here's Ayagura circulating on what our timing screens are certainly indicating are worn tyres, or tyres he's certainly been running from the start of the session. He's also putting in some strong second times on board his factory Aprilia. Marc Marquez, of course, on new tyres, because he will be seeing those tyres that he crashed on again. So he resumes his session with 8 minutes to go. So Marc Marquez is going to do well to get 4 more laps in.
Just a quick note on Di Giannantonio, if you joined us, which I'm sure you did in Goiânia last weekend. Fabio had a pretty big get-up in the morning warm-up session. He said he was sort of underestimated just how much he whacked the left shoulder which caused him so much problems throughout the latter stage of 2024. He said he was in a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain for periods of that Brazilian Grand Prix. He was really stiff, didn't have a lot of mobility with the left arm on Monday as he jetted off to New York for his special VR46 delivery. No excuses, he said, though. Can't use that excuse around the Copa circuit. But it'll be interesting to see how that shoulder holds up around what will be 20 long laps here on Sunday. Martin then up into second. He's the second rider into the 2:01s.
Confirmation on your screens, as you can see, Di Giannantonio is on fresh rubber, like Ralph Fernandez. Brand new medium front, medium rear combo for the 49, who's now got around 27 thousandths in his pocket over Jorge Martin, who just took second place. But Di Giannantonio looking to further extend his advantage out of the final corner, turn 20, and he's now down to a 2:01.8. He's a 10th clear of the 2024 champion.
Yeah, he was third in the Grand Prix here last year, despite being laid low by that nasty bout of illness. That was his first podium since his victory in the Qatar Grand Prix 2023. Podium with Moto3, who will never forget that second place here in Moto2 in 2021 when he rolled out the t-shirt. The speed is back, Digit is back. Classic. Well, he's back at the top of the timesheet here in Austin this morning, keeping a very close eye, monitoring the progress late on of Marc Marquez. This is just going to be lap number 6 of that he wants to be completed by the factory Ducati rider. This is going to be a very, very cautious approach, isn't it? As far as Marquez is concerned, I'm not sure what's happened to Alex Rins this morning, but he's a bit off colour to say the least. I mean, Alex, we haven't seen him have any sort of technical dramas. We've certainly not seen him on the floor. 3.959 now has got Rins cut adrift at the back of his pack. He's almost 3 tenths behind Marc as it stands right now in the factory Yamaha.
The Yamahas once again in the bottom third of the field there. Fastest rider at the moment, unsurprisingly, is Fabio Quartararo, but he is in 16th place and a second and a half currently off the pace of Fabio Di Giannantonio.
Just looking at the top speed figures, we've got Quartararo, Miller and Razgatlioglu. In fact, all 4 Yamahas are in the bottom 5 in terms of top speeds. Razgatlioglu is on the slowest bike out there in terms of top speed, 329.6 kilometres an hour, which compared to Bastianini's rocket ship KTM RC16 is giving up almost 13 kilometres an hour. That long backstreet. Razgatlioglu at the moment is down in 19th place. Once again, he's got the measure of his vastly more experienced teammate Jack Miller, the former podium finisher here, of course, himself, Miller, in Austin.
A couple of tenths away, in fact less than that. He's a tenth away from Quartararo, the leading Yamaha at the moment in this session, so he's might be down in 19th place, but a good morning so far this for Top Prac. His fellow rookie Diogo Moreira is on a near identical time to him at the moment. Moreira in P18, he's also a second and a half adrift as Rigamonti watches closely. His world champion now rounding a corner which he lit up the rear tyre in last year's sprint and almost by himself to the move. Marc Marquez can scarcely afford a repeat of that mistake now.
He's going to be in the 2:02s for the first time on this lap. It looks like he might be closer, maybe a low 2:03, depending on how he attacks this final corner. that's for sure, run to the finish line. Having seen the checker flag first and throwing many occasions. Mark Bassaki joking in the press conference yesterday, saying that, well, Mark's won almost so many races here in Austin, and well, I've won in my entire MotoGP career. He wasn't far wrong, actually. Mark's won 7 times winner here, Bears and 8 times now MotoGP winner. Did he make it into 202s? Of course he did. A 202.656, and he is very battered, he is very bruised, but as always, he's defiant in the face of adversity. The number 93, that's climbing up into P11.
This is where MotoGP riders really do separate themselves from just mere mortals like up in the commentary box, because surely so much in your mind would be telling you now to get a little bit more margin to take a backward step, but Marc Marquez does not know the meaning of a backward step.
Costa out on fresh rubber, as you can see on the screen, soft front. A medium rear tyre combo at the moment for Acosta, and he's looking to make it count as well. There he is in the 37 bike. He'll be a little bit aggrieved that his stay at the top of the MotoGP World Championship was no more than just 3 weeks between Thailand and Brazil. There's Acosta now as we come through this tyre tension. 3 right-handers, 16, 17 and 18. That's where we generate some of the highest tyre temperature of the season. Probably the last corner, I'd imagine, coming through, probably climbing the left-hand side where we're the time of the campaign where really turns the temperature on the side of the tyre where it gets so high. High Acosta could be as high as 2-1 here. I'm sure he's going into 2-1. He does indeed a 201.75. So the Red Bull Grand Prix of the United States, we have a Red Bull KTM factory racing rider in T1.
And Marc Marquez well on target to get himself up into the top 6 here. He should be on the fringes of the 201s with this, maybe a low 202. As he now approaches the final corner, turn 20. So building confidence, building speed is the reigning world champion, and beginning to build some blocks back up the order, up into 4th place at 202.0. What crisis, says Marc Marquez.
Pretty amazing. You just have to dock your cap with that mile in the work race. Because of course he's done it so many times. Big punches having clear, picks himself up, dusts himself down, and comes out and just shows the top-notch talent that he is. 202.093. So Mark almost the 4th rider in the 201 this morning. There's only Acosta, Vigil Antonio, a Martin that are ahead of him at the moment. This will just be easing a bit of tension inside that back of the Ducati, just feeling a few nerves. The butterflies in the stomach when Mark crashed right here, going down through turn 10 right at the start of this session. That did momentarily bring out the red flags, but sometimes when you see the 93 back against the air, that's when he really does come out fighting and swinging. 4th place after a 192km/h crash at turn 10 would be a heck of an effort.
Yeah, he does like a challenge, does Marc Marquez. Make no mistake, this weekend and this year, Marc Marquez has a challenge, not just from the Aprilias, but clearly from his own current situation in the Ducati that exactly started this season in the vein of form that we expected. Pecco Bagnaia, who, of course, remember, was leading the session a little bit earlier on in proceedings, he's now been dropped back down to 11th place, and with 20 seconds or so in the session, he will get one more lap like this. Time now ticks away. He puts in his best lap of the session at 202.511. Of course, Pecco Bagnaia is not the kind of rider to get sucked into any kind of posturing and new tyres late in the session. This will be Bagnaia on the same set of tyres he started FP1 with.
Pecco Bagnaia going to stand up for the first time really in that 2026. We have seen precious little so far this year, haven't we? Alex Marquez as the front running force on the Ducati GP26 Brazilian machine. Alex, of course, seen him forever in P2 for most of 2025. 8th at the moment, coming into his 3rd round of the season, just a 13 points collected by Alex. Of course, there was no points for him on offer in that season opener in Buriram. A bit more like it, a bit closer to the front he was in Goiânia, a 7th in the sprint. And the season makes so far 6th in the Grand Prix. But given how he laid his stall out early on in the early part of last season, where he was just reading on podiums in front, he was the world champion, wasn't it? After the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez. It's fair to say that transition over to the new GP26 has just run out into a little bit of a curveball.
It's fair to say he's not maximising qualifying pressure at the moment. 2 qualifying sessions gone. Battles Marquez, we get to see him start on the front 2 rows of the grid. And this is so much of the hard work done in MotoGP nowadays. If you qualify well, it just sets you up for the sprint over 10 laps tomorrow here in Austin. The 20-lap Grand Prix to come on Sunday. Checkered flag is now out, all bar a couple of riders have taken it, and it will be Pedro Acosta that ends this very dramatic Friday morning in Austin as your fastest rider. So
that's the fastest. Fabio Antonio, well, he'll be riding the crest of the wave, looking to build up the momentum, getting a couple of laps to him. A very rare proposition that will be Gilles first in almost 4 years after Mugello 2022. Hey Martin, good line for the Spanish rider because he is finding that new Aprilia very much to his liking. The last of our 3 riders that did find a lap in the 201s, and then Marc Marquez. Well, what more can you say about the reigning world champion on the floor, getting medical checks after a monumental spill, 190 km/h crash going through turn 10. It's so often does, you just can't keep a good rider down for too long, can you? Mark rebounding to 4th place. Ralph Hernandez recovering from what was a distinctly underwhelming Brazilian Grand Prix is 5th. Alex Marquez rounds out the top 6. Luca Marini, well, he's going to be top Honda runner, 202.3 from Marini. Luke 7th, ahead of Ayagura. World Championship leader Marco Bezzecchi, who had his worst ever Friday in Brazil with MotoGP career. Last time out, finds himself in the top 10. I mean, steady away. Bez. To start for the Spanish rider. 201.936 as Marc Marquez then begins the immediate impression is just feeding back, just I'm sure physically and technically how he feels after that short second run.
It looked like he was describing a little bit of instability there, wasn't he? On board that Ducati, which is not what you need when you just throw yourself down the road at the best part of 200 kilometres an hour.
Break, so this first corner, we're going to take a look at Jack Wheeler. Just look how much those front forks are compressed there as he's braking. And then, yeah, that's a save and a half from Jack. Well done, Jack. Give yourself a pat on the back for that one. Just as he was on the power out of that first corner. If you stand on the grid here, stand on the start-finish straight, looking up to that first corner, you are staring at an elevation, the highest point of turn 1 of over 130 feet, over 40 metres. Davide Tardozzi readies himself for the practice start session here, of course, immediately after FP1, as always. There's going to be so many relief faces across the whole of Ducati, and particularly those close to Marc after this big spill at turn 10. This is Fabio Quartararo getting that factory Yamaha a bit lively, to say the least, as he powers through the 4th gear 10.
Dancing the rear of his Aprilia through that particular corner. Joan Mir on board the Honda. Marc Marquez takes a look at how some of his rivals are doing it. None of them are having a particularly comfortable ride there, are they, through turn 10?
That's why it's called the horsepower rodeo, because you're hanging on for dear life. I've heard so many riders that you first came in, 13 years ago, they will tell you turn 10 just gives you the impression like you're dropping off the end of the world. So many riders have moments and get through unscathed. This big moment very early on in that opening session caught out Marc Marquez, but he did pick himself up and he did find a 202.093. A little bit of pain and discomfort for the remainder of the weekend, I'm sure. As we know, if anybody can block out the pain, as far as Marc Marquez is concerned, is adrenaline. So desperate to be mentioned to put himself back onto the top step of the podium here in Austin. One of his chief challenges could well be a rider who posed him a big headache in the sprint in the Grand Prix over in Brazil last weekend, Fabio Antonio. Has that momentum from Brazil, and he's rolling with it so far here today in Austin.
Clearly looks very competitive, doesn't it, at the sharp end of the field. KTM, Ducati, Aprilia, the top 3. Ducati, Aprilia, Ducati behind that. First Honda, Marine 7th from 2 more Aprilias, Agura and Bezzecchi. And Ducati completely top 10, and you can see there, those Moto3 manufacturer, the brilliant Ducati KTM, all with their strengths and weaknesses around this perfect circuit.
That massive crash against turn 10. Untouchable in the first half of this Austin average. You saw that from McGrath was Pedro Acosta. Really making the majority of his 201.715 through sectors 1 and 2. Just giving an indication there maybe of the steps and the strides forward he feels that KTM did make in the winter. A lot more sort of mid-corner turning than themselves some electronic understeer, which has been a real bugbear on Acosta over the last couple of years. They may not now have the fastest motorcycle or a clear advantage in terms of top speed, although the KTM does lead the way. We've got the top speed this morning. Bastianini running 42.40 is matched by the Ducatis of Gian Antonio and Marc Marquez, so it just seems like KTM stops better and certainly turns better. No part thanks to the great work of this man behind the scenes, Paul Scriber, of course, KTM test rider, who does such a phenomenal job as the development rider on the RC16.
Clearly, on balance, makes this KTM RC16 a better motorcycle all round than it was last year. It might not be as explosive in a straight line, but also by turning better, you also look at your tyres much better. Pedro Acosta described that in Burran when he held up quite nicely in that battle for second place late on in the Thai Grand Prix. Didn't have the putting down the order on more tyres than he had for a lot of last year.
We know it's one of the fastest starting motorcycles in Grand Prix right now, and Acosta made a perfect launch there. Quick listen to Mark on the factory Ducati. Look at him drag away though, up the hill into the first corner. Pretty good launch that way. Factory Ducati's getting hooked up nicely for both Mark and for Pecco Bagnaia. Engaging the start device, the whole shot device. There's the world champion leader Marco Bezzecchi. It's the clutch. The initial launch was pretty neat and tidy. Just a bit of air time on the front wheel. So the pretty start device, so 26 is brilliant. Marco Bezzecchi was second on the grid on the front row in Guyana last weekend, but completely out-dragged the Ducatis of Biggio and Marquez off that front row of the grid, and that was it. He was gone.
So low when they lead the line. It really struck me when we were watching from the pit wall of the practice start sessions in the 2 pre-season tests, just how low that bike squats to the ground. And certainly helping them on the run to the first corner, because that was really where Marco Bezzecchi's Brazilian Grand Prix was won, by getting himself to the first corner first, getting the jump on positive to Fabio Gian Antonio off the line, and once he did get that jump, they never saw him again.
Pretty clean getaway that, as far as Frankie Morbidelli is concerned. Desperate for a return to the Grand Prix soon, almost a full calendar year to see on the podium. 18 in Qatar, and of course that was a bit of a diff when Maverick Vinales lost his top 3 with the tire pressure penalty. So an eventful, far more eventful than he would have been hoping for starting to this Austin Grand Prix as far as Marc Marquez is concerned, but it started in painful fashion. It's at least ended with him showing that he's got the pace, he's got the speed, no question. 202.093 ends Mark's session. Back on board with the fastest ride though in FP1 here in Austin.
Take 2 then for Pedro Acosta, who pulls onto the front row of the grid, which I think he's up for right now. If he was offered a place in second place on the grid, on the front tyre there, wasn't it? From the KTM, so Pedro Acosta was pleased with his second attempt at getting his KTM off the line. Bastianini to the left, Marc Marquez in the centre, and Fabio Gian Antonio not quite as close to Marc as he was at points in the Brazilian Grand Prix when they were literally leaning on each other through turn 6. Marc Marquez now to drop them together.
Yeah, there's no one area that KTM surely have identified for Acosta to improve. It's his qualifying. When you look at 43 MotoGP starts now. Only 5 of them he has spied away from the front row of the grid. He's going to sort of have to ramp up if he's going to be a real serious title contender in 2026. Martin buried under the bubble of that factory, a brilliant chin on the tank. That was a beaut. That was a beaut from Martin. Lovely work. Picked him up in the perfect time there on our camera on the outside of the grid. If he doesn't get back to winning ways this weekend, Lewis, you feel that when we get back to Europe, there's some real Jorge Martin strongholds coming up. The red in particular. Yeah, there are some real good circuits coming up for Jorge. He'd love to be back on the top of the podium here this weekend. I think at the moment he's just consolidating this brilliant start to 2026. I keep forgetting as well, of course, he missed 3 days of pre-season testing over in Sepang. He was underprepared compared to everybody else coming into the season. Just shows the great nick he's got himself into. And once again, it's just how darn good the improver is right now.
Yeah, he said after his podium finish last weekend, I always knew that once I was 100%, speed has never gone anywhere. He's always had that speed, the speed that made him MotoGP World Champion back in 2024. So Aprilia, as mentioned earlier in the season they're coming at Ducati from all angles. We've already seen Bezzecchi take 2 victories. Ralph Fernandez has been on the podium. Ayagura might have done the same had he not had some poor qualifying and poor starts. And of course, Jorge Martin second. So the Normali brand have got 4 genuine front-running contenders here.
Yeah, they've got 3 bikes in the top 5 once again at the end of play this morning. Good news as far as Trackhouse are concerned. And at front of what will be a rather big guest list for that American-based team here this weekend is Ralph Fernandez has been able to quickly put Guiani behind him. Good job that by Fernandez, he was quickly this morning. I think Maverick Vinales fair, given the fact there's some concerns over the condition of his left shoulder. Not bad actually as far as Top Gun is concerned. I guess it's going to be, in terms of endurance runs, distance runs, 10 laps is the sprint, 3 p.m. local time here in Austin tomorrow. 20 laps double. The distance, as always, will be the main Grand Prix here on Sunday. But as openers go, given the fact that he's not at his physical best, not a bad effort that by Vinales, mid-202s and within a second of the fastest pace.
Yeah, and Tech 3, who we already heard from Guyon, speaking of Jack earlier on in the session, would have probably taken that, given how their Brazilian weekend was looking for the most part. Marquez removes the gloves. Not the same circumstances that we saw him removing them earlier. Quite off the left glove. Potentially might be a little bit more of a painful experience for the 93, given the bandaging and strapping we already saw. Yeah, he's been a little bit careful there, trying to eke that left glove off. There you can see the strapping on that left hand, and I dare say he might have some further exploration and some extra checks done on that left hand in the 3 hours or so he's now got before he's back on track.
Fabio Quartararo was 900ths of a second away from being the slowest Yamaha rider in that opening session. Went into Jack Miller at 202.631. Maybe Miller and Rins went out on the threshold at the end of the session. Fabio Quartararo perhaps didn't. You'll find out in the lunch break what was the sort of tyre situation as far as the Yamahas were concerned. But it's Miller that finished there at lead rider in 12th. Alex Rins, who was down the wrong end of the leaderboard for much of this session, 22nd to 15th. That actually pushed Fermin Aldeguer down to last place. Of course, we saw Aldeguer in action in 2026 for the first time, last time out in Brazil. You always feel a track like Austin, Lewis, when you fresh out of big surgery on a damaged left femur, all the change of direction you've got to make, all the hard braking zones. This was going to be a real big examination of where Aldeguer's at physically. And at the moment, it's already been a tough experience.
Yeah, 1.6 seconds off the pace, and he also is an even bigger or exaggerated example of what we were talking about a moment ago with Jorge Martin. Of course, he missed the Sepang test. Fermin Aldeguer missed all of pre-season testing, so not only is he trying to get himself back into physical condition to ride these bikes once again, but also hasn't got the time on the bike to really get the best out of it.
See there, look like a little bit of gravel rash, maybe some cuts, a little bit of breaks, maybe a bit of bleeding under that bandaging on Mark's left hand and left wrist. Well, we're in the live music capital of the world, and giving Daniele Romagnoli his crew chief there. A bit of karaoke here from Jorge Martin. On a serious note, he is feeding back some vital information back to the Normali engineers. Another really positive start to a Grand Prix weekend as far as the mark mate's concerned. And certainly that's the case as far as Pedro Acosta goes as well, because he was fastest in FP1 here in Kota. A 2:01.715, the KTM star back on top.
Top 3 were all in the 2:01s this morning. Pedro Acosta, Fabian Gianantonio and Jorge Martin. KTM, Ducati and Aprilia. Marc Marquez did lift himself up to 4th after crashing. Ralph Fernandez and Alex Marquez completing the top 6. Luca Marini top Honda 7th from Another pair of Aprilians, Ayagura and point leader Marco Bezzecchi. Morbidelli 10, ahead of Pecco Bagnaia, who did lead midway through the session before dropping to 11. Miller 12, top Yamaha. Vinales and Bastiani for Tech 3, KTM next up ahead of Rins, Binder, Mir. Fabio Quartararo 18, ahead of Top Rat in 19. John Zarco and Diogo Moreira for LCR, under the radar in the 203s. 21st, just ahead of Ferdinand Aldeguer.
It feels like every session so far in 2026 has had some kind of big story, a big headline, and some drama. Well, that one's certainly the case as well here in Austin, Texas, as the former king of COTA, Marc Marquez, had the big early crash at turn 10, finishing 4th place. Costa didn't go out on fresh rubber before that third round. You can see new soft front, new medium rear tyre, and that's what catapulted Acosta to his session topping 2:01.715.
Fabio Gianantonio also going for fresh rubber on his third run, medium front and rear, which got him into the 2:01s to take second.
Arrested once again by our 2024 world champion, Jorge Martin. He was out of some warm rubber on that third run, wasn't it? Getting some good information there on the medium combo was Martin.
Another lot to look at for Marc Marquez here for very obvious reasons. Run 1 ending with that crash at turn 10, but he did lift himself up into 4th by the end of run 2.
Sector 1, which includes that sharp, steep rise up into the first corner, was led by Pedro Acosta. Fabio Gianantonio second ahead of Alex Marquez.
Acosta also owning the second sector, which takes us partway through the back straight.
How does he do it despite the big get up at turn 3? In sector 3 it is Marc Marquez fastest ahead of Didier and Martin.
Of course, the fresh rubber also helping through those triple rights and the 2 lefts to end the out with Ralph Fernandez quickest there.
Well, if he's going to reclaim the throne as the king of COTA, Marc Marquez is certainly going about it the hard way. This is how his round 3 in 2026 started, in pretty dramatic fashion. Super slow-mo, not really doing justice to just how severe that crash was for Marc. 192 kilometres retracted when he lost control of that factory Ducati. He picked himself up to finish 4th quickest, being a fast rider on the opening session here in Austin. A perfect start to this Texas Grand Prix weekend. Pedro Acosta, quickest in F1.
MotoGP's third round sees us taking our third continent as we land in North America and the USA. Our sole visit brings us to the Lone Star State of Texas and its capital, Austin. A few miles away, one of the longest tracks on the calendar, the circuit of the